What's up, everybody? Joe Fortin here. Um, I've been putting this together for a while, actually, at least a few months. I remember speaking to my Heilkunst about this back, probably about July or August. And I saw a video earlier today, which was a clip from London Real, which is a show on YouTube that I actually really enjoy. The guy that puts on the show, I can't remember his name, but he has a lot of people come on his show from different walks of life, and they share knowledge, and they share different viewpoints about how the world works. And he had David Icke on there as a guest, and whatever your opinion of David Icke is, the clip that I'm going to post a link to up here was, in my opinion, 100% accurate. And as I've said before, some of the people that are in the mainstream, especially in the truther community, are kind of controlled opposition, and they may have been placed there for different reasons. But here's the thing. I've said this before. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. And I also use the little saying, it's like the finger pointing to the moon. Don't focus on the finger or you'll miss all that heavenly glory. And what this is kind of explaining in this case is an ad hominem fallacy, right? So what a lot of people do is they'll say something like, oh, well, David Icke is full of shit, so I'm not going to believe anything he says. That's an ad hominem fallacy, right? It's like if you had a debate between a physicist and a plumber, right? And the physicist is saying 2 + 2 = 5, and the plumber is saying 2 + 2 = 4, right? What's the truth? The truth is 2 + 2 = 4, but a lot of people are going to believe the physicist because of this fallacious thinking, which is that, the truth is dependent on the speaker, which is never true. The truth is the truth regardless of the avatar that it is flowing through. So with that in mind, I'm going to explain a couple of things that I have been working out about how homeopathy works. And I'm going to tell you why I'm breaking this down and why I'm explaining this. First of all, I've sought to understand these things for myself because I've been using Heilkunst and homeopathy to heal myself. And, I know that it works. The proof is in the pudding. Go look at my videos from 3 years ago and look at how imbalanced I was, and look at how sick I was. And, I was dealing with my problems by drinking, and I had severe soul fragmentation, and I looked very bipolar, and I had severe emotional issues. I had PTSD. I had basically like OCD for a while. I definitely looked bipolar. I had ADHD issues. I was having a lot of physical issues, and I have cured a lot of that. I don't take any medication. I haven't even taken an aspirin in a year. A lot of people, especially if you use Google, which is, that search engine has been totally compromised, and it's being used to deceive people because they are modifying the search results. So if you just search for something like homeopathy on Google, the first page of results is all going to be about how homeopathy is quackery and, how it's bullshit and all this stuff. Well, you can believe that if you want to, but all the people that I know that have actually used it and have done something like Heilkunst and done a complete trauma timeline and have used this system of medicine have gotten significantly better. They've seen astounding results. And, I'm not interested in the dogma of science, and that this is part of what I'm trying to shed some light on. So what I'm going to explain to you is a theory about how the law of similars and the law of opposites function. And I'm going to explain this in terms that are rooted in electrical engineering and vibration, basically. I'm going to quote Nikola Tesla once again. If you want to understand the universe, think in terms of frequency and vibration. So, it's my contention, and of course, I'm far from the first person to make this assertion, that essentially everything is vibration. And what we see here in physicality is vibrational energy that is at a certain density. Now, you're free to go look up those terms and what densities are. Densities and dimensions are often, kind of confused. Bernard Gunther really explains this well. veilofreality.com. Go check him out. He's awesome. But what I'm seeking to do here is to bridge the gap between so-called scientific thought, mainstream scientific thought. So essentially what I'm going to be talking about here is a little bit of physics, basically. It's electrical engineering, but it's based and rooted in physics. And the spiritual pole of things, that which we cannot, at this point in time, at the level of consciousness that we're at, physically measure. I think that these concepts that I'm going to be discussing will at some point be measurable. I think that we probably will find a way to measure this, and I think that when we do, it's going to revolutionize the way that we approach healing. They're already doing some of this. This is what David Icke talked about in the video. People who are talking about water structuring, which is one of the things that's actually used heavily in Heilkunst. They've managed to figure out a way to photograph water structure, and this is how water memory works, and that's one of the concepts that Heilkunst homeopathy is based on. It's based on water memory, and the droppers, for example, you use that. So, but again, you're free to explore all of that. I'm going to try to keep this in simple terms that everyone can understand. If you want to look into this in more depth, there are plenty of resources available online, although I wouldn't recommend using Google to find them. I would recommend using DuckDuckGo, or another search engine. There was one I found recently that was really good, but I can't remember the name of it. But yeah, don't use Google. Google's garbage. So I'm going to explain to you some things about waveforms and phase and constructive interference and destructive interference. I'm going to explain what all of these mean. I'm going to, again, use some electrical terms like I did in one of my previous videos where I was talking about twin flame union, vibration, and emotional purging. I'll put a link to that above. I think that that would be a good prerequisite to watching this video if you'd like a more thorough understanding of vibration, of a certain aspect and perspective on vibration. So let's get started here. Okay. So if you think in terms of, I like using electricity. It's certainly not the only waveform that you can measure, but it's a good one for explaining things, in my opinion. You could use waves in an ocean. You could use sound waves, but I use electricity because it's something that I understand. So what we have to discuss in order to explain constructive and destructive interference is phase. Now, I've made a diagram here of a waveform. Now, this is a sinusoidal waveform. and otherwise known as a sine wave. If you took like algebra, you're probably aware of what this is. And what you need to understand is that basically waves occur in a cycle. And so what I've done up here, you can use fractions of pi to do this as well. That's one of the ways that they do it. But I'm using degrees in a circle because it's something that is more commonly understood by laymen. So you've got your starting point, 0 degrees, right? And if you're going clockwise in this cycle here, you got 90 degrees, 180 degrees, 270, and 360, which is back at 0. Okay, now that is represented on this waveform here, right, where you start out at 0 degrees, and 180 degrees is the crest, right, and then 360 and back to 0 again for the next cycle is the trough. Now, I'm going to explain how I believe the law of opposites works. So, everything has a vibration, right? Everything in physical existence, everything in the known universe operates on the principle of vibration. Vibration, in terms of spirituality, though, is not explained well, and that's sort of one of the things I'm seeking to elucidate here for people. Again, I would recommend that you watch the other video that I posted a link to above. Now, again, that only explains one facet of vibration as it pertains to emotional states, but it's going to give you the ability to correlate things a little better. So let's say that your being has a lack of vitamin C. And let's say that a being that has a lack of vitamin C operates in this waveform, right? Having a lack of vitamin C puts your energy at a certain resonance, right? Now, I'm going to say also that this is far more likely to be several, maybe hundreds, maybe thousands of different waveforms all at once that create the resonance for something to exist. But for simplicity's sake, I'm going to use one waveform and explain it in that way. If this graph here represents a lack of vitamin C, right? And this lower graph here represents the resonance of vitamin C, right? What we've got here is two waveforms that are 180 degrees out of phase. So in other words, where this graph is at 180 degrees, this graph is at 0, right? So they are opposites of each other. If you were to add and subtract the charges, like if this were, if you were measuring the flow of electricity, like amperage, or if you were thinking in terms of water, if you were measuring the amount of water that was flowing in one direction. Now this is alternating current. So at one point the electrons are flowing in one direction, and one point they're flowing in the other. What's going on here is that these are stacking on top of each other and canceling each other out. So at any point on this graph, right, if you were to take these two waveforms and overlay them on each other, on this top graph here, where this one's 180 degrees out of phase, you would have a wave that is drawn in the opposite pattern, right? And let's say this one's, negative 50 amps, and this one up here is positive 50 amps, right? And then you had another wave down here that was negative 50, right? What it would happen is they would cancel each other out and it would set to 0. And I believe that's what's happening with the law of opposites, okay? Now, in order to more thoroughly explain this, I'm also going to explain like waveform signatures on the next page. So I'm going to get to that to explain why different materials and things like that have basically appear different in reality, and why giving like different remedies, for example, has different effects. So I'm going to get to that now. And again, I'm explaining this the best that I can, and I'm trying to explain this in simple terms. I'm going to be going to school for this, so I will have a more in-depth understanding of all of this as time goes on. But this is my theory, and my intuition says that it's accurate, and I'm going to try to prove it. So I've given you an example of a type of waveform here. On the first page, we had the sinusoidal wave, right, which was kind of curved. This is called a sawtooth wave. And if you want to understand more about this, talk to musicians. People that do use electric guitars and stuff like that use different types of waveforms to get different sounds. And it has a signature, and it has an effect on the body and the mind and the spirit. And, that's why when you hear certain types of guitar sounds, it makes you feel a certain way. So here what I've drawn is an example of the law of similars, right? So I'm going to use a commonly known homeopathic remedy, Staphylos aureus, right? And I'm going to give you a couple of examples of what people who have that staph energy manifest. And I'm just going to give you some simple ones, right? People with staph energy tend to have a mindset of victimization, and they tend to exhibit anger around that. There's also, if that energy is existing within someone's being for long enough and with enough charge, there are physical symptoms that can manifest as a result of that as well. So I've written down some charge levels here just for making an example, right? So let's put this in terms of amperage in electrical terms, right? And we'll say this is negative 50 amps. This is positive 50 amps. So this just represents the charge level of the waveform in someone's being, right? Now, it's my contention that there is a certain threshold here, which I'm going to label as 50 amps, just as an example, right? And so with destructive interference, which I just explained, right, the waveforms cancel each other out. With constructive interference, the waveforms add to each other and actually increase the power. And this happens in the ocean when you have rogue waves. Rogue waves are a manifestation of constructive interference. It's when two waves or more line up with each other in resonance, and then they stack, and it makes this one really big wave. And so if you've got this example of the energy of a being, right, this is where they're at, and then you give them a staph remedy. Let's say this is the staph remedy, right? And let's say it's at a certain potency level, right? It's at let's say 10M, right? That's a potency level that people are given. And let's say that 10M has the same waveform, but it's at a strength of basically the charge positively would be 25 amps, right? A total of 50, and this one's a total of 100. But let's say that adds to this one, right? What that's going to do is that's going to constructively interfere, and it's going to create this waveform, which is positive 75 to negative 75, right? Total charge of like 150 if you were to add them together. Now, let's say that the threshold at which a being begins to expel this energy is at 50, right? So in this graph, what's happening is a part of that energy is above the threshold here. This threshold is at 50, right? And so then what happens is the being is essentially forced to expel some of that energy. And that's why when you're given like a remedy, right, what'll happen is you'll go through a healing reaction and you'll actually experience some of the symptoms, right? So if you give somebody a staph remedy, and I've experienced this, what happens is, and this, not always, but one of the things that can happen is they can be extremely angry for a few weeks while they're going through the healing reaction. And that is that energy purging and expelling from their being, right? And I believe that's happening because it's above the threshold at which that has to occur. And so, like, if someone's given a 10M, right? Once it's above that threshold, that energy is lost, right? And then once this wears off, now what do you have? Well, I didn't draw it, but you can subtract 25 from 50, and you would end up with that person resonating at, the same waveform, but it would be 25, right? Because it subtracted the first charge here. It subtracted the charge from the remedy. Because above this threshold, that energy gets destroyed, gets removed. And so then you've got a person who's basically vibrating with staph energy at a charge of positive 25, right, and negative 25. Now, what you could then do, right, after, because someone can only purge so much of that energy at once, you have to do this in stages, right? What you could then do is give them like a 20M remedy, right? And let's say that a 20M remedy has this waveform, right? Plus 50, negative 50, right? Add that to 25. Wait, that's, yeah. Add that to 25, right? And then the entire thing after the remedy wore off would subtract and end up at 0. And that's what we're doing. So we don't want people in resonance with staph energy because it's disease energy. It's unhealthy, right? And so that is that is my understanding of the mechanics of how this works, put into more scientific terms, let's say. Now, of course, I want to add that this is certainly something that I'm working on. My depth of understanding of this, homeopathy, the law of similars, the law of opposites, is still kind of in its infancy. There are people, like Steiner, for example, who've already put all this together. The issue that a lot of people in the mainstream have with the information that he has disseminated is that it's antiquated, and the terminology that's used is it doesn't fit well with scientific terminology of the modern era. And so what I'm seeking to do is show that this science actually does work. And I want to put this into a more modern package that can be explained to people within the conceptual framework that they've been taught through mathematics and chemistry and physics, because I don't think that these things are all necessarily at odds with each other. I think that people within mainstream science are left brain imbalanced, and I think that they're very ego attached to the dogma and the way that they think things work, and they're very ego attached to a materialistic viewpoint. But a lot of the concepts and things that they're teaching are true, right? Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to build computers and build rockets and do all these amazing things that we've done. I just feel like what needs to happen is both sides of the aisle, right, need to open their eyes and realize that we're not really as at odds with each other as we think we are. So that's it. That's my video for today. I hope you enjoyed it. My theories here and my explanations of all of this will improve as I learn more. And I really intuitively feel like what I've shared with you today is accurate. But of course, as a true scientist, I am open to being corrected, and I don't have any attachment to what I've just stated being the truth. I'm seeking to find the truth. I don't have any attachment to the outcome. I just want to find methods of helping people become well that are sound, and I want to be able to explain that to people who maybe have had a different background than I have. So that's it. Thanks for watching. I hope you liked this video. Drop some comments if you have any questions, and I'll talk to you guys later. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button down below and click the icon to your left to subscribe. New content every week about spirituality and addiction from myself, Joe Fortin. Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you next time.